All right. Well, it's just a couple of minutes past the hour, so let's get going. I'm Andrew Lockhart, the head of marketing at TrustMAPP. I want to thank all of you for making time to join us today to talk about uh, NIST Privacy Framework 1.0 and how TrustMAPP can help you with your assessments. Um, as housekeeping, please use the chat if you've got any questions or comments for our speakers today. And I'd ask all of you to remain muted throughout the talk. We're going to try to get through all this in about 45 or 50 minutes. So you'll have time to grab another cup of coffee before you head off to your next meeting. Our two presenters today, if we can flip the slide, you're going to hear first from Adam Stone, our Chief Privacy Officer and our Vice President of Solutions Delivery. And then Ian Atchison, who's our Director of Solutions Delivery, is going to drive the demo and show you how TrustMAPP helps with NIST privacy assessments. Adam, I'm going to turn it over to you now. Oh, and I have to let all of you know we are recording this webinar. We will post the recording online shortly. But since this is a privacy demo, we thought we'd better make sure we mention that. All right, Adam, over to you.
Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate it. Oops, I moved on to the wrong slide here. So hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today. Before we get started on the substantive demonstration here of the NIST privacy framework, we'd like to provide just a very basic overview of the challenges that we believe TrustMAPP solves for you, the data privacy and/or information security leader. TrustMAPP provides a number of important elements necessary to help you identify, prioritize, and report on the maturity of your data privacy program. With that, the platform provides a sound messaging platform, both to ensure consistency, but also to make sure that any sort of metrics that you're using are those that resonate most clearly with the senior executives within your organization. The platform also allows folks to understand risk relative to data privacy, and that risk has a correlation with the notion of maturity, which we'll talk about in just a moment. And so those both risk and maturity kind of go hand in hand, and add to that, of course, the third leg of the stool, which is compliance. Last but not least, one of the true benefits of the TrustMAPP platform is that it will help an organization understand what it needs to do to improve maturity over time, but also then a clear understanding of the resources necessary to get the job done, including an assessment of the sort of skills necessary, but whether it's internal resources or external resources. We'll talk a little bit more about the TrustMAPP platform as we go along here, but let's start with the substance of our presentation today. And I'd like to start with a basic question, which is, and this is a rhetorical question, I'm not asking for answers from the audience here, but the question is, how do you measure and communicate the business value of your privacy program? And there's, depending on who we're talking to, there's a number of answers that we can expect would be provided. One might be that we measure the effectiveness or the business value of a privacy program by complying with whatever framework or law or regulation we are subject to. That is a good measurement, but it really doesn't articulate the business value of the privacy program. And we will argue through this presentation that one way to really articulate the business value is by using maturity as a key measurement unit. Before we get started, just to kind of tee up the presentation and the actual demonstration of the software that Ian will be providing to us. This is the NIST privacy framework boiled down into its salient points. The NIST privacy framework comprises 5 categories. I can't recall if the framework refers to these as categories or something else, but within TrustMAPP, we call them categories. And then as you can see here, underneath the categories are any number of processes supporting a given category. And we can see that it's not symmetric. There are some categories that have more processes than others. The idea behind this is to provide a structure for not only how an organization will assess itself against the NIST privacy framework, but also how an organization will present the data back to stakeholders. And I should note that one of the benefits of using the NIST privacy framework, especially for those folks who may straddle both sides of the fence in security and privacy, the NIST privacy framework does align quite nicely with the other prevailing NIST framework, which is the NIST cybersecurity framework, or the NIST CSF, as well as other NIST guidelines that have been published. So another quick question here, and we hope that we can provide you with some answers to this question through the demonstration of TrustMAPP here. But the really important question is, what do your executives want to know about your privacy program? And I would argue from my own experience in the trenches for many years, my understanding of what the corporate executives want to know is really two basic things. The question is, how have you helped our organization make money, or how have you helped our organization save money? And if you cannot articulate one or both of those questions in a clear, cogent manner, you'll probably lose your executive stakeholders at that point. If you start speaking in terms of compliance, for instance, my experience tells me that that is not something that really gets executives interested in the content of your discussion, and it isn't as effective in driving change throughout the organization as it is to articulate business value in terms of money made or money earned or money saved. And again, we hope that TrustMAPP provides some insight into how we might answer this question. Now, we mentioned maturity as a unit of measurement here, and depending on who you ask, the definition of maturity could be any number of things. For our own purposes, we have hazarded a guess here, or our best guess at what maturity means in a data privacy context. And we chose an organization that is well known across the world as one that focuses on quality and the importance of quality for an organization's overall product and product offerings and strategy. And so we have determined that one way, perhaps a very good way, to understand maturity is to understand it in terms of or as a function of performance management, which, as you can see from this definition, performance management is really three parts, which is the delivery of ever improving value with a clear contribution to ongoing success, the improvement of effectiveness and capabilities, of course, and then continuous learning and improvement over time. So using that basic definition of maturity as a unit of measurement, we then start taking a look at we will, as you will see, start taking a look at the NIST privacy framework in terms of 6 attributes, or across 6 attributes. We'll call them maturity attributes. And you can see here, these attributes are quite common sense when you think about how to measure a process in support of a data privacy program. These 6 attributes make a lot of sense. How well does your executive team understand the business value of a given process in support of privacy? Do you have the policy framework established to create that basis for action moving forward? Do you have the so-called privacy enhancing technologies, or PETs, to help automate your privacy program where necessary? Do you have the right people, whether they're internal or external, Are there accountability structures in place? And how robust are those? Do people understand what their roles are? And last but not least, do you have clear and consistent goals set for each process in support of your data privacy program? We're going to look at all of these as we move into the assessment demonstration. I do want to also make you aware, and this is just for your benefit as you're looking at the screens that Ian will be sharing in just a moment. The maturity scale that we have here, and you can see it's a scale of 1 to 5. And we have predefined what these maturity levels mean. For those of you who are familiar with CMMI, the acronym CMMI, we are roughly following that acronym in terms of understanding an organization's level of maturity from lowest to highest. We also have established scoring thresholds, and these are important, obviously, because as we're taking an assessment, this will help us understand areas that we need to attend to more vigorously than those that perhaps are lower priorities, obviously with the red, yellow, green metaphor of the stoplights. You will see that carried through in the demonstration that will be happening forthwith. And so with this, I'm going to end my presentation and hand the screen over to Ian and let you get set up here on TrustMAPP. Ian, it's up to you.
Thanks, Adam. All right. So hopefully you can see my screen.
All set. Yep.
Great. Okay. So we are logged into TrustMAPP as a company administrator, and the company administrator is capable of managing the assessments across the organization. So we have full access here in this view. In today's demo, our fictitious company is a large enterprise with about 10,000 employees and a large number of data requests. That's important because TrustMAPP will scale up and down on its recommendations, which we'll see as we go through the platform. So on the desktop here, we've got our dashboard. On the upper left-hand side, we have our maturity score, which is a 2.3, just under 2.4, and our goal, which is a 4. And that's taken from that 5 kind of tiered maturity scoring that Adam referenced for CMMI. So this is all adjustable. The organization could be a 5, a 4, or a 3, really whatever is applicable to the organization's business objectives and risk appetite, essentially. The maturity score is an aggregate of all the assessments that are conducted for that organization. And we have some high-level numbers here based on what's been completed for the organization, which we're actually going to dig into in further detail under the assessment page. So when we start off, every assessment obviously starts off with essentially receiving data from users, right? Ideally, key stakeholders within that organization. So we'll start by what that view looks like. So as a respondent user to an assessment, I'm going to be assigned different categories within a given framework, in this case, the NIST privacy framework. And I can see what's been completed, what's remaining. I may have other categories assigned to me, or I may not. Really depends based on my role within the org, which is great because now we start reducing assessment fatigue and really kind of hone our questions and to the appropriate individuals to receive more substantive information back. So we click Take Assessment. We can see we've got one question left here around responsibility and accountability. And these questions, they're phrased the same way throughout the assessment, which reads as, based upon your observations, which of the following statements most accurately describes the current state of your organization's responsibility and accountability as it relates to the inventory and mapping? So if we're not familiar with the NIST privacy framework, under additional context here, we provide a definition around responsibility and accountability, as well as inventory and mapping, which is great for those that may be less familiar. Even those that are familiar, kind of helps keep us focused on the intent of the control question. For the respondent, they can select their maturity score for what they believe is appropriate. And below that, we have supporting details. Currently, I have it set to be optional. Typically, we'd recommend making that required just to ensure that you receive a little bit more of detail or understanding as to why the response statement above is selected. This can be turned on for required, optional, and also completely disabled if you're looking for more of a survey format, but generally making that required is recommended. So individual can provide a justification in this box below, free text field, and then supporting artifacts. A little different approach than typical GRC platforms, and this is kind of the differentiator here for TrustMAPP is we're not asking for organizations to upload yet data yet to another document repository. The artifacts live within, say, in this example, 0365 in the customer's environment. There's no uploading, we're actually linking. So that information stays in the organization's control. They manage the permissions and so on, but they can link using OneDrive. They would save their response, and then they can see that they've completed their assessment questions. If we look back, we can see everything's been complete.
And Ian, if I could add, for those of you on the phone, you may have noticed that the answers that are available to a user, they do not have a number attached to them, and that's by design. We would rather folks provide feedback based on sort of their abstract notion of where we are from a maturity perspective than simply assigning a number 1 through 5.
Great, thank you, Adam. So as we're staging up our assessment, I can just point out here that we have our users added to the assessment. We can see that we have our different functions or categories for this framework. And we can also turn off, as I mentioned earlier, which questions or categories we want to send to those individuals. We can also see the status. So if something is 50% complete, 75% complete, we can see that information here. Just helpful to kind of keep status on things. Within TrustMAPP, we also can import risks, which is helpful to assign risks to or align risks with process categories or areas within the organization. So our example here at the top around cyber insurance coverage or lacking of cyber insurance coverage. All our typical categories are what we capture here. So it's widely applicable for most organizations. So our risk type is financial loss, since the organization does not carry cyber insurance should they have an event, and the status, of course, is to transfer that risk to the insurance holder. And we could adjust all of the impact likelihood ratings and so on that you would typically expect to see. And this is here under processes, we can assign different processes to this risk type, which later on we'll see how we marry those two up to help inform stakeholders and remediation planning for the organization. So typically responses or assessments are broken up in 2 phases. We have our assessment phase where we're sending questions, receiving data back from respondents, and then we have a review phase. So we may receive different types of responses based on who we're asking. Some may say they're further along than others, but what we can go through here during the validation phase is to actually look at the information provided and make an edit if need be. That may be the maturity scale, it may be around supporting details or attaching an artifact, but we can see over time what's been changed. For example, we may have a user here that commented not applicable, or they didn't want to provide a response, where we can actually go in and maybe have clarification now, and we can provide a different response detail. Business objectives is another area that we'll touch on as we're creating our assessments. We basically can identify business objectives to make sure that our program is supporting the organization's goals. Again, not operating in a vacuum, but we're making sure that we're there driving the organization forward from a privacy perspective. So we have, again, our objective. This is all customizable. Description, we could place in there, and our priority. Again, we're aligning those processes from the framework to the business objective. We can provide analytics around this, which processes are working towards that goal, and that's what we'll do under analytics. So we'll touch on a couple of high-level dashboards under the analytics here. with the time that we have. So typical heat map view, which is pretty nice to see, lets us hone in on outliers, right? Areas where we're performing quite well, area where we have a little bit of work to do, and then deficiencies. So obviously we want to place our attention on these kind of lower scoring, maturity, and potentially higher risk items. Again, I mentioned at the top of the demo that this is a large organization that receives a large volume of data requests. So you could see where we may need to hone in and improve our overall program. So keeping high level in this view, we're going to start at the Board of Directors report. Board of Directors report is a great way to, at a high level snapshot, how are we performing? We can provide an initial score for the organization when the assessment's complete, and with that, we can also adjust the maturity goals. So we can do that by category within TrustMAPP. So not all categories should be treated equally necessarily. Sometimes they can be, but some organizations have needs to tailor these a little bit more to their appetite. So we can see at a high level how we're performing, and then over time, as we're working through remediation, we can look at revised scores as well. The nice thing about that, to doing this more in the traditional Excel kind of approach, is we don't have to wait the 12 or 18 months to see how we actually improved rather. Oftentimes we think we're on the right track, but here, if we're working through tasks within TrustMAPP, we actually can see that improvement in real time. We can actually dig deeper if we'd like to. So we'll look at control, since I had a number of outliers in there. We're in data processing. So you'll notice at the top in these graphs here, we have our capital costs, which is really our financial investment that may be required. So we can provide some data around that practice, and then also the level of effort. TrustMAPP will break down, as you can see here in the table below, initial effort in hours for remediation. This is to address the deficiency and basically move it into an acceptable level of maturity. And then we have ongoing effort in hours per month. Again, this is a very large organization, 10,000 employees, so this is going to be scaled up accordingly. Ongoing effort in hours per month is to maintain that control or that process area. It's important to remember that just because an area has been remediated, it's not going to stay that way. So we have to account for the ongoing effort in a month that we'll need to spend or allocate to that. And then we also have our costs. So this is any type of financial investment that would need to be made into a process area. If you want to dig a little bit deeper, we can expand out data process management, and we can look at the different categories or subcategories within the framework. And we can see one of the areas we scored low is around privacy enhancing technologies, or PETs. So typical example for that is going to be a data subject access request tool. Something that can help streamline this process, or semi-automate it or fully automate it, especially given the number of requests that this large organization may receive. We break down our recommendations. So we look at our initial effort in hours, 122, and then we have ongoing effort in hours per month is 13 hours a month. And then our initial costs to implement a technology such as a DSARS tool would be about 150,000 for this organization. Below that, we provide a narrative as well. So most organizations, if they score low, let's say a 1, and they need to be at a maturity level of a 4 or a 5, they're typically not going to make that transformation overnight. So we provide phased approach on how to address these improvement goals. I'll note here in our first phase, we reference specific technologies, OneTrust or TrustArc. I should point out, this is not an endorsement of any specific technology, but it's there to provide you guidance on what you should be looking at. Organizations create tasks off of these items by clicking on new tasks. And they can also adjust their task goal. So I said it again, our task goal here is to be a 4, and our process goal is to be a 4. Well, that may be the goal, but let's say maybe we're in the middle of the quarter, we know we're not going to be able to make that investment. So maybe we're going to scale down our task goal here just to kind of move the needle forward slightly, but still be mindful of costs and other areas. We're also going to assign a task owner. and a validator. So once the task is complete, the validator would say, yep, this meets the intent of our remediation, and it'll automatically update the score. We also provide budgeted hours. So initial labor hours, for example, is 122 hours. So we can plug that in. In some cases, we may find that we can get this done in fewer hours. So we can maybe modify that and put something lower if we need to. We can set our begin date. So this is kind of where we'll see the internal workflow within TrustMAPP start to build out our remediation or forecast map. So we can plan this out, as soon as early as today or tomorrow. We can also stagger this out to maybe September, October, whenever we think it's more appropriate. And we could say roughly the number of hours per week that we plan to work on this task. Since we have a bunch of tasks created here, we're just going to click on the task dashboard and just dig into that a little bit further. So within the task dashboard, we can see what activities that are pending, how many are actively being worked, and how many have been completed. I mentioned the maturity forecast. This is a great way to answer the question, whether we're talking about privacy, as well as security, for organizations. We can see how we currently score and when we'll be at a point where it's acceptable, right? Essentially answering that question, when have we spent enough on privacy? When have we spent enough on security? So we can kind of put some expectations based on the data that we've created, right? This isn't an estimated forecast. This is actually a work plan that we've developed for the organization using TrustMAPP. So task hours versus actual versus budgeted. So we provide those projections, and if task becomes, we start finding that it's taking more than the budgeted hours, we can actually start asking those questions. Why is it taking so long? Is it a skills gap? Is it just a lack of resources? But help inform and drive those conversations. If we're coming in under, then maybe that's just another reason to celebrate our teams. So task detail, number of ways we can filter this information down by a given process area or category. We can also look at task owners and start looking at, how much are we overtasking, undertasking, progress that's being made. We can see all that information here, who started working on what, essentially holding each other accountable to make sure that we're working through our task items versus kind of ignoring them and falling behind. So in improvement planning, similar view as we saw before, at a high level. Another nice thing we're able to do with TrustMAPP, though, is provide some modeling as part of our remediation planning. So, organizations typically are working towards some type of business objectives or contractual requirements. So we can actually go in here under the modeling and say, we have 12 months, essentially end of the year, or 9 months, I should say, to remediate, and we could do some modeling around our hourly cost per employee and how many hours we can allocate to these projects. And we can do some assumptions, such as the initial number of resources it will take to remediate the entire program, and then ongoing resources that will be required to maintain the program. And we're getting pretty close to the end of this demo. So if folks have any questions, I'd suggest maybe putting those into the chat, and we can try to address those with the time that we do have. So compliance assessments, another nice kind of view we can talk about, how we're meeting our compliance objectives. Again, we don't want to always talk about compliance, but at the same time, it is a requirement. So we do provide the analytics for the admins within the tool, so they can see essentially where they are from a maturity perspective. And as well look at views for where we are within the goals for the organization. So, we have set our maturity goals that we talked about, those are set in green, and then we can also see how we're in yellow, or the second row of dots here, markers, and how we're meeting or failing to meet our objectives. For a number of these screens, we can actually expand these out and see a lot of the same views, so we can create tasks if we have something that we need to address. And as part of that workflow, we can also see if we have any existing tasks. So for example, we may want to improve on our previous task. Maybe we've originally set our task to be a 3, and then on the next task we create, we want to move to a 4. Again, kind of working towards that overall maturity goal, because you can have multiple tasks for a given item. And I'll pause here. And Andrew, do we have any questions?
I don't see any questions so far, Ian. Again, I invite everybody to use the chat feature here in Zoom and post a comment or question there. But it looks like nobody's got anything right now. So Ian, I don't know if you were gonna, all right. So we do have a question. What other types of assessments can we handle?
Great question. So TrustMAPP, essentially, we can support security assessments and privacy assessments. So, you know, we do a wide range of your typical NIST assessments, CMMC, GDPR. You know, we've got state regulations that we support as well. But essentially, if it exists, we can create it if we don't have it. But we've got over 55 templates, assessment templates in TrustMAPP today. So it's ideally used for privacy as well as security for most organizations.
All right, thank you. Any other questions or comments? Is the functionality for security assessments similar to what you just showed us for a privacy assessment?
It is. So if you've done one assessment within TrustMAPP, it'll carry the same look and feel and format. Some of the analytics will look slightly different, but it all feels very familiar if you've done one assessment across many others.
All right, thank you.
And to that point, so within TrustMAPP, we have 2 major types of assessments. We do compliance assessments, and those are going to be a bit more binary in nature, not implemented, partially implemented, and fully implemented, where maturity assessments have more of that nuance, right? So, typically we'll measure across 5 tiers, with some exceptions being CMMC, but we can modify those. But yeah, we do 2 types of assessments within TrustMAPP, and the maturity assessments are really where most of our customers focus, because we provide recommendations and those cost analytics for improvement.
Great, great. Ian, you talked about how TrustMAPP is already preloaded with these framework templates, and as well as the remediation recommendations. How many aspects of the tool can be customized by our customers?
Essentially, every part of it can be customized. So the templates, when we create them, our solutions team will build out the templates, handle the cross mappings within the tool, and we also build out those recommendations. I think, and then also within the cost calculations and hours for remediation as well. So those are all built within the template. However, if a customer wants to make modifications, kind of use a certain wording or verbiage or tone for the assessment, want to modify even the hours that we use, that's all there for them to manipulate to kind of make it a little bit more their own. If they want to build a hybrid assessment, for example, if we're doing the NIST privacy framework, we also want to address security, we can do a hybrid on privacy and security in a given template, and that can either be done by our TrustMAPP team or actually by the customer.
Okay, great. Got a question that came in. It's really for me, and that's just wondering if we're going to be posting the recording of this session. And the answer is yes, we will. In a couple of days' time, have this up on our website, and we'll get the link to the recording out to all of you to enjoy one more time. And obviously, we hope you'll share it with your colleagues as well. Any other questions? I'll give everybody a few seconds to get that chat window open and send something our way if you've got anything on your mind. In the meantime, Ian, do we need to shift things back over to Adam for some closing comments?
Yeah, sure. If you don't have any other questions, you can pass it back over.
Thank you. Ian, that was an excellent presentation. I appreciate it. I want to, while I'm getting my screen back up, I want to throw out the offer one more time. Any of the participants on call today, any other questions that we can help answer for you?
I don't have anything coming in here, Adam. So why don't you just go
Okay.
ahead and wrap us up?
That sounds good. So just to kind of sum up the TrustMAPP experience, as it were, for the privacy leader or the information security leader, TrustMAPP is a tool that helps us do four things really well. The first is that it helps us understand or identify the information that we need to understand the maturity of a given process or set of processes in support of a larger framework. The idea behind that is that whatever framework you choose is likely the framework that sort of underpins your privacy program. After you collect that data through the assessment, you then have the ability to report that information in a way that resonates, we believe, with senior executives, with the people that actually pull the purse strings. And that's important. It's in order to get an executive's attention on this subject, which I'll be quite frank, privacy and security, though it might be very exciting for all of us on the call today, it's not as exciting for everybody. That includes corporate executives. And so a privacy leader's goal or a security leader's goal is to really engage the executives. How does that person do that? By speaking in their language. And that's where the reporting capabilities really help inform a more business-focused approach to reporting results to the executive team. Obviously, those results will be informed by the modeling tools that we provide within TrustMAPP. And then last but not least, of course, is after you have gotten the information you need and have quantified it appropriately and prioritized it, it is then time to remediate. And we provide the tools to help you through that remediation process. The really cool thing about the remediation process is that as you work through those remediation activities, your privacy score will reflect the changes. So every time you finish a given remediation activity, your maturity score will inch up based on whatever parameters you've defined for that particular task. And so that's kind of cool. You can see your progress over time, which is very helpful. With that, I thank the folks on this call very much for taking the time with us today. We appreciate your participation. And I want to throw an offer out one last time. If there are any questions or comments you have for us before I give it back to Andrew and we can close this demonstration.
Thank you, Adam and Ian. And while we wait to see if there's any final questions, obviously we tried to move swiftly and cram a lot into a short demo, as you obviously saw from the screen capture that Ian was doing. There's a lot of modules and a lot of moving parts in TrustMAPP. So if you ever want a more in-depth demo, please contact us. You can go to the contact us page on the website, send an email to info@trustmapp.com. Reach out to me directly if you've got my email address. But obviously, we're delighted to arrange a more in-depth demo about security or privacy assessments that would fit your organization's needs. I don't see any other questions coming in. So I think we can wrap this up, give everybody back a few minutes today. And again, our hearty thanks for joining us today. Take care.